Hi friends, this is Carter, and this is actually intro number 1 of 2. I actually have 2 intros to this episode. The second intro will actually talk about who's on, and it's an awesome guest. But this intro is to just let you know what? This is my 100th episode. When I started, it's funny, when I started this podcast, I kind of said to myself, let me do 100 episodes and then see what I think, see how I feel, see if I can even do 100 episodes. And I think I started during the pandemic, 2020, sometime mid-2020. So it's been about 3 years to do 100 episodes. And it's been a hell of a journey because I didn't know anything about podcasting. I read a lot about it, got all the equipment, and tried to figure out how do I get guests, and have since established really good relationships with a lot of bookers. And made a ton of new friends in the process. And it's been a very fruitful journey. Not financially. Oh, hell no, not. I make no money on this, and I spent a lot of money on this, but I knew that going in, that wasn't going to be my goal, was to make money. And my goal was to learn about other people. And when I listen to podcasts, I like to listen to interviews of people because I like to hear their journey. How did they get to where they are now? How did they become who they became? And I kind of thought to myself, well, what if I did that, but with writers? I want to hear about the writer's journey. I'm not necessarily wanting to talk to you about your specific book. I want to hear about what made you want to write. And then when you did decide to write, how did you dig down and find the tenacity to go through the finding an agent process, finding a publisher process? It's such a hard journey. I'm just fascinated by people who decide to take that road. And so 100 episodes later, I've learned a lot of different things. I've made a lot of new friends. And what I think has struck me the most is the commonality of stories between all these disparate types of writers. Everyone's got, I hear a lot of the same thing about, I never felt like a writer. I have imposter syndrome. So many books of mine never sold, but I just kept writing out of spite. It's just interesting to go back and listen to some of them and hear kind of the through line through a lot of different stories. So, I just wanted to say thank you for listening and watching these episodes. I know there's some of you out there who've consumed all of them, and I sincerely appreciate that. I hope you're enjoying them as much as I am enjoying making these episodes and talking to these wonderful, wonderful people. So episode 100 coming up next. Thanks for being on this journey with me. Hey everyone, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series between writers. So obviously I talk to writers of all sorts. I guess I tend to gravitate towards mystery, thriller, suspense writers. That's kind of my community. But how it basically works is I either reach out to somebody that I know that I want to talk to, or somebody pitches me, usually a PR team. So I have several different PR teams who reach out and say, hey, would you be interested in talking to this person? And so sometimes they pitch me people I know, sometimes they pitch me people I've never heard of before. And it could be a writer of any different type of genre. So, I kind of choose who I want to talk to and whatnot. And I'm always excited because it means I get to meet new people. I get to experience new writers who might be really well known, but I'm not necessarily familiar with. And that was the case today. Man, I just had a great conversation. And just to give you the background, every time I record one of these conversations, I immediately record this intro because I don't want to forget, wait a month and then record it and try to remember what our conversation was about. So I always record it fresh. So that's why I usually have this high energy, because I'm always pumped from talking to an interesting person. And today, man, I talked to Javier Castillo. So Javier Castillo is a tremendously successful Spanish writer. And most of his success has come initially in the Spanish markets, but now it has expanded greatly. But now he is launching the English edition of one of his most popular novels, The Snow Girl, with Penguin Random House. And it's a book that has sold over 1 million copies, has inspired a Netflix series, tremendous success. And what's so interesting about Javier is, and you're going to hear in this interview, is just how he's been writing his whole life, despite going into a job in finance and economics. He's always been writing short stories, and his first novel, he approached it as like, I have an idea that I think might be more than just a short story, so I'm going to write it as, a series of short stories that are all linked together and they're chapters. And he finished this book and just put it up on Amazon himself, and it became this. Not only did it become a huge hit on Amazon as a self-published novel, but then he starts getting publishers coming out of the woodwork saying, "Hey, we want to republish this as ours." And so, he's probably as close as you can get to an overnight success, also being very cognizant of the fact that he's been writing his whole life. But he had tremendous success right out of the gate with his first novel, and it just hasn't stopped. So he's, and he's obviously very reflective on that, and has a huge sense of gratitude about that, and it's allowed him to quit his job and be a full-time writer. So it's kind of the writer's dream that he's living. So it's very exciting for him. I think you're going to like this one. The guy's got a lot of information to share. Very generous person, and he's got tremendous insights. This is my conversation with Javier Castillo. Hola. Buenas tardes.
Good Spanish. Good Spanish.
My very, very poor. I know solamente un poco. My ex-wife is from Argentina, so my kids grew up learning Spanish, and so I know a little. I know enough to be dangerous.
You know all the bad words.
Yeah.
They are very creative.
Yeah, they are. Especially when there's a football match going on.
Exactly.
You were in Malaga, no?
In Malaga, yeah.
Yeah, I visited there a long time ago. Beautiful. Visited there in Marbella. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Marbella, exactly. Now it has changed a lot, actually, but it's growing like very fast, the city. But it's incredible now. It's a lovely place to live, and it's close to Marbella. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right on the coast. It's it's a beautiful part of the world. I'm here in Colorado, so mountains, not the sea.
Mountains, yeah.
So I assume you learned English growing up in school, no?
Yes, I kind of learned English. I think watching How I Met Your Mother or something like that. The show.
Hey, if you can learn it that way, that's great.
Yeah, it's great. It's funny, and it's very difficult to follow some of the characters. Barney Stinson, the funny guy from the show. It's so very fast.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's great. It's a great practice. But they learn with that, and also I traveled out. And then I studied in France and in Shanghai. So I was living with English people and also with French people. So we communicated to each other in English and in French. So I also learned French in that way. So
yeah, wow. So when you do these interviews in English, is it exhausting for you? I would think it would.
No, not actually. It depends on the topic, but it's fine. It's I think it's my second language, and I think I speak better English than French. But for example, my Italian is a disaster, but it's not that good. But but I try. I try to speak as many languages as possible here and English is kind of okay.
It's excellent, and I'm curious to hear. I want to talk to you about your journey, because I know that writing wasn't necessarily what you set out to do, and that's very similar to me. I had a business background for years and years and years, and then just started writing. So Did you? So you're from Spain. You grew up in Spain.
Yeah, I grew up here in Malaga. I still live here in my hometown, in the place where I grew up, and I always loved books. I always loved reading. I always just enjoy little short stories. Actually, I began writing short stories when I was like 10 years old or something like that. It was very funny at the beginning because it was a shock moment for me when I read one of Agatha Christie's book. It was the United States version. The name was There Were None, I think it's the name in America. And when I read that book, I said, okay, this is incredible. I've been liked many times, so I want to do that. So I started writing short stories like with suspense, with twist. At that age. And then I kept that hobby of writing short stories. Usually, what I did was I was every time I read a book, I tried to replicate the theme of the book in a short story with another idea, but trying to replicate the theme. And then I played that way, just writing. But I studied economics, I studied finance because it was the easy thing to do in Spain. It's usually I think it's something that is happening worldwide. It's very difficult to get a career in writing because it's not easy. It's very difficult. It's everywhere in the world. And I said, okay, I study finance. It's very easy to get a job, and I will do that. I also enjoyed doing mathematics, so it was kind of easy for me. But then I kept that hobby. It was to me, it was like a moment of relax, writing and
meditation
for myself, just doing something like creative, And then when I finished my first novel, it was in English, the title would be something like The Day the Sanity Was Lost or something like that. It was my first novel. And I remember the moment when I finished it. I told my friend, "Oh, guys, I have I've written a novel. If you could read it, I uploaded it to Amazon. It could be great if you leave a review or something like that." And then 2 weeks later, I came back to check if one of my friends reviewed the book, and suddenly it was the most sold book in Spain. At that moment, I said, "Okay, what's happening here?"
Wow. Wow.
And at that moment, I started receiving proposals from many publishers in Spain, and I picked my current publisher is Penguin Random House. It's the same as in the US. So.
Right. Wow. Okay.
It was incredible.
Well, we have a lot to.
I left my job, so in that moment.
That's amazing. So we have a lot to unpack out of all of that. So first of all, just going back to when you were 10 and you were creating that short fiction, as somebody who probably had the ability to have other distractions like video games and whatever, where do you think that comes from? That love of story, the love of reading, is that from your family?
Well, actually, it was. I grew up with. I remember those years because I grew up with my mother had a health problem, and I had to stay at home with her, just taking care of her. And you enjoy video games just for, at least for me, just for a short period of time. Right. But then I said, okay, I'm tired of just watching through a screen. And so I started reading a lot, and then suddenly it was like, okay, this is fascinating. I started like enjoying too much. And I said, okay, I want to do this and to try if I'm able to write and to practice my inner thoughts. And in those moments, I used the writing just as a way of escaping what was happening in my house, and also as a way of, I don't know, to focus on something that was my own, And it was during those years where I like enjoy what the process of creating, because it made me like travel to other places. I was trying to escape my home, and then it was like I remember those years like with sadness, kind of sadness because of what was happening, but also with joy because of the way I was trying to learn what I was doing. Trying to learn to write, trying to getting to know myself. It was like a very emotional moment for me.
Yeah. I can. Well, and writing is, I think in a way, a lot of writers, including myself, look at writing as a way to control something. Like there's so much you can't control. And I can picture you, with the situation with your family, you're saying an escape, but it is, I can control this story. I get to choose what happens.
Exactly.
And there's something so transcendent about that. So, but it's also interesting as a young child doing the writing, it sounds like you were actively also trying to learn the craft, not just writing, but you sounds like you were actually trying to get better and understand how stories work.
No,
Like you
actually,
said,
I learned by imitation. I was trying to replicate just the book I've just read. So it was, if I read, I don't know, Stephen King, It, for example, I remember writing a short story of, instead of a clown, I created like a monster. And it was the same. It was a monster. It was not with a balloon, but it was with a football. I was so I was like trying to touch the same things, but in a different way. And I learned just by intuition and imitation. It's the best way to learn. Actually, I have the feeling that writing is the only thing, the only art where to learn, or the masters are just waiting for you on the shelves. Is you have the end product and the final product, and all the techniques are just here. It's
and just constant repetition, just writing and writing.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
writing and reading, reading and writing.
Yeah, and you're not trying to like make a direct copy of something, but you're trying to absorb kind of how, what you felt like when you read it. So you mentioned the deception in an Agatha Christie novel. You were obviously attracted to the idea of like, I did not guess what was happening, and
Exactly.
I want to create that same feeling for somebody else.
Exactly, and trying to understand why I loved a character that much. So I said, okay, this character, I love this one. Why? And I always trying to check all the books I like. I said, okay, what all these characters have in common? And they have they are suffering an injustice. They are having like a hard time at the beginning, and we get to know them, but they don't show exactly how they feel. And I was learning just by reading and trying to replicate. That was the moment and the process.
Right, and it's not as easy as it sounds, right? Because
exactly.
When you start looking at a book and a character who you love, and you start to ask yourself, well, why do I love this character? And you can start listing a lot of the things that happen to them that's interesting. But a lot of times it's the voice, it's the emotion that I care about this character because I feel for them more than I feel for maybe a two-dimensional character that has the same stuff going on. And that's all about how well it's written or how poorly it's written.
Exactly. And it's not only the attributes, it's also the craft, the way the narrator tells a thing, or even the voice of the character. Even if the narrator is the character himself, you need to create that connection with not only with just one reader, with a connection with many readers. So you have to trying to touch many different emotions, just to connect, have a reader to connect with just one, or at least with two of them. If you are a master, you can get them love the character that too much because they have many things that are intriguing and mysterious about the character.
Right, and it's not a formula, right? Like
No, it's not a formula. It's impossible.
I feel like the only way for me, the only way of achieving any of that is to write for myself and say, like, here's a character who I want to write about, who is interesting to me. Because if you overthink about it, if you overthink it and say like they have to have all these characteristics, you lose it. I think.
I mean, it doesn't work. I mean, it feels like I don't know, like a figure, a shape that you are trying to create, not a real person that speaks to the reader.
So you're an interesting example because I see this a lot with writers who don't go directly into writing. Right? You study something else because you're smart enough to know that choosing a career as a writer is a really stupid thing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
but what's so interesting is people who, like yourself, who start writing when they're young and keep it as a hobby, that writer will always come out. somehow, eventually. You can't avoid it. And so you studied finance and economics and very, very left-brained kind of things
Exactly.
and business, but you still had that. That's exactly like me. You still had that creativity. You're like, what do I, what do I do?
Yeah, but it also helps you. In my case, I also have learned that studying economics and finance have helped me write the way I write, because, for example, my plots are already planned and I are very carefully structured. And studying finance was like I had to plan everything ahead, and I was that moment where I had to schedule. Okay, we're doing a project, for example. I was like, okay, we're gonna go through all these steps just to get to the final financial model or to the finance goal, or the company has to meet those goals. And when I start writing, before I do it, I need to plan it, and I plan it like very carefully, and I feel like it's an art. The way you create the voice, the character, the feelings, the emotion is that part of the brain, and it connects the reader. But also the other part is like I don't know, like a structure, like trying to be like an architect, and trying to make the character go through like a roller coaster of emotions. Like you have to, like before, I don't know, very dark emotion, you have to give the character a little moment just to breathe and just to, and you need to understand those and to plan them in advance, especially in thriller and in suspense, of course, because you need to hide all the little clues and to be very careful with the hints you give.
And I mean, and the connection to business I always find is that thriller writing is problem solving. You like you said, you have the outline, so you're solving the problems of how to make these revelations, how to make the character suffer, but also not always be about suffering. And the same thing with business, and you were probably writing in business as well, and that teaches you how to kind of just be to the point, like don't
accurate, and just to avoid trying to avoid the random words that doesn't mean anything, and just to I hate that moment when you're reading a book and suddenly you start reading in diagonal. It's like you start at the beginning of the page, okay, it's not happening anything, and you start jumping lines, skipping lines. And I hate that when that happens. So I try to like be very precise with the words, precise with everything every character says, and I try to like to go to the point, go to the emotion, but also trying to be like very subtle in the way the story flows. So it's funny, but it makes you like be very careful with every page,
Right. And that's the editing process also, right? Is like you have to be very honest with yourself. As it's some like so with a business job, sometimes you'll be reviewing something and you'll look at it and say, this is good enough because it's my day job. With your writing, you can't do that. You have to really challenge yourself and say, these sentences, how are they serving my story? And if they're not, you have to delete them. And sometimes that's very hard to do because it's exhausting to be that honest with yourself. Do you find, because you structure your plot so thoroughly, do you find that the editing therefore is very easy, or as you go along, you don't?
It's difficult and it's always tough because you fall in love with paragraphs. You fall in love with your style. It's something like every writer has. It's very difficult to say, okay, I've said all this wonderful sentence, but it doesn't add to the story. But what do I do? And so it's always difficult. But I try to get like very practical. What I usually do, for example, there's no girl. There's no girl is the novel that just being released in the US.
Yeah.
The first version of the story has I don't know, maybe 160,000 words, something like that. But yeah, but then at the end of the book is 100,000 words. So it's a huge cut, but usually it helps the story or the rhythm. I try to be very precise, and I try not to fall in love too many parts my own writing, but it's always very tough.
Yeah.
And then after that first cut, my editors come and my publishers come just to check if everything is working, and they usually try to cut a little bit more, and I always try to strive to fight.
Yeah.
Fight.
Yeah.
But it's a negotiation usually.
Yeah. I mean, in the US or in English, we call it killing your darlings, like cutting out anything, even though you love it, but it has to go. And it's hard to do. But for me, it helps just telling myself, well, more darlings will come. There'll always be good writing coming from me, hopefully. So it's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay to cut. So you're working in this corporate finance job for years and years, it sounds like, and you're still writing stories on the side. At what point did you say, I'm going to write a novel and I'm going to figure out how to do that while I'm working full time?
Well, I was writing short stories, as you said. I remember one day I had it was a very weird dream, and I said, okay, this is actually the dream was like a man walking down the street with the head of a woman, and suddenly the man looked at me and said, "There's one day left for Christmas," or something like that. I said, okay, this is incredible for a short story. So I started writing like the first, like a very short version of that, trying to create a fiction around that moment. And then I said, okay, maybe I have like something longer here. Let's try to play. Let's play with this idea. And I planned the whole story. That was my first book. And when I planned the whole story, I said, okay, I will try to write it, because I didn't. It was my first novel. Usually I felt like it felt like very long, like very daunting process. It was like, okay, this is gonna be like 1 year work. And I usually write just the 3,000 words short stories or something like that. So I approached the novel as writing just one chapter as it was a short story. So it ended up being like 80 chapters or something like that.
Yeah.
And with I usually I approach the process the same way I did it, like creating in every chapter an emotion, a twist, and a character revelation or something like that. And it was my rule. So when I began working on that novel, then suddenly I started sharing with my wife every chapter. And she was like, okay, this is good. Where is the story going? And she was asking questions about the story. And it was like a fun game. So that kept me writing that long story. I actually enjoy it a lot. So that's the cool part of writing a longer version of the short stories. I try to face the challenge as short stories with in a longer form, with the same story going on.
And so when you finished that novel, and your wife approved,
exactly.
You decided to, what was your next step? Because so you self-published that on Amazon, is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. What I did was, I liked the story. I already edited myself, and I said, okay, I'm gonna send it to 4 publishers. The 4 big ones in Spain. It was Penguin, it was Planeta, and there was other 2 imprints. And when I sent the novel, one of them was by email, and they replied with an automatic email saying, okay, thank you for your manuscript, but we have a very long queue manuscript to read, so we will tell you something in 1 year time. So I said, okay, 1 year I don't need that. I was already working. I didn't need to publish. So I said, okay, I'm not waiting 1 year just to see if the people like the novel. So I said, I uploaded to Amazon. I put a price, a small cover, synopsis, and then I told my friends, but my group of 5 friends in WhatsApp. So that was my promotion. And suddenly it was like that moment, it was like very shocking. I remember when 2 weeks passed, I came back to Amazon. It was very funny because I saw the novel on the top, and I said, okay, this is my novel. Next, the number 2 was, I remember, was Ken Follett. And then the number 3 was Pere Reverte. It's a very famous, like the most author in Spain. I was number 3 out, and I said, okay, this is by alphabetical order, because Castillo, Follett, Reverte. So I said, this is alphabetical order. And it was my first thought. I said, okay, no, it's the rank by sales. And it was like incredible at that moment. And after that, I remember like receiving like proposals from all the publishing houses in Spain, like trying to publish my book. And I said, okay, it was like very shocking. I signed with Penguin, and they told me, okay, we didn't expect to have another book signed and to publish another book from Amazon, but we really liked and we see the potential of the book. And they told me it doesn't enter in our schedule, so we are gonna need to wait 2 years to publish it. Is it okay for you? I said, okay, I'm not.
So the same book.
The same book, exactly the same book. I had to wait like 2 years just to be on paper. And I said, okay, but let's leave it on Amazon in the meantime, and then we'll be publishing on paper. And in those 2 years, I remember like it sold like 100,000 books on digital,
Wow,
30,000 copies in paper, like in print on demand or something like that. And it was very. I remember the moment when the book came out in paper. It was like very. I don't know how to say, because I felt like I already sold everything that I was about to sell. It was the feeling like somehow Amazon helped me sell the books, because maybe the algorithm, maybe maybe Amazon was saying, okay, if you like this book, somehow my book always was recommended. It didn't feel like real,
right.
But that's when the first day the book came out, yes, it was sold out the first day. Then in the first week, we already did 4 reprints in the first week.
Wow.
And then like in 3 months, I already have sold like 100,000 books in paper in Spain. I did my first presentation. The first day it was for my family and my friends. After the success, the Penguin told me, okay, maybe you should do a book signing, because we didn't expect to do any, because it was your first book. It was, just the presentation in your local bookstore, but that was the marketing plan, was that. And then I remember they said, okay, maybe with this amount of sales, you should do like a book signing. No, so I did my first book signing, and like 3 months later, to the book signing came like 1,000 people just for the book signing.
Wow.
I said, okay, yeah, it was like, okay, what is happening here? It was like incredible. That moment was like, okay, this is surreal,
That's amazing.
Yeah. I remember like 4 or 5 months after the presentation, I said, okay, I just had my daughter, my first daughter. So I said, okay, maybe this is the moment to think about my life, maybe this is the moment the chance I have just to leave my previous job, just to spend more time at home, trying to be with her more, because I was like missing many parts of her life. So I said, okay, I have this chance. I made my calculations. I said, okay, I'm in finance. So I said, okay, I've already earned this money. Maybe I have 3 years just to try if this writer career works. Suddenly, it's been like a crazy ride, actually. That's basically like every year has been like incredible and going farther and farther. And even with I remember the most shocking moment was when the Snow Girl came out, and it was 2 days before the Spanish lockdown. I don't know if you know what's happening in the Spanish lockdown, but it was very, very crazy, because it was like 2 days before the book was released. Then 2 days later, all shops, bookstores, everything was at home. You couldn't buy books, so it was like a disaster, actually. But then suddenly something magical happens in that moment. People began to be like really tired of watching TV, watching Netflix, scrolling through social networks. So people started reading a lot. Right. And in that moment, people started buying the Snow Girl under the curtain. All the bookstores were closed, but the books sellers were in the store selling books under the curtain. And suddenly it became like the most sold book during the lockdown. And it was like crazy figures. And it was like incredible. And it was during those days when Netflix bought the rights to make the show. So it was
Wow.
incredible.
So you know that's a very unusual career path.
Yeah, I know. It's I have many rights.
You're like, this is easy.
I mean, it seems easy, but it's not. It's very unusual. And the thing with also, actually, I know when Netflix comes, all of the eyes are on you, and suddenly you start like selling rights worldwide. People from imprints from everywhere in the world buy the rights to publish your book. So now, for example, the Snow Bear has been translated into 20 languages. It's published in 80 languages, 80 countries, or something like that. So it's incredible.
Fantastic. And it's funny because, you know, the risk of self-publishing is huge because, you know, first of all, like, you know, unless you have it really professionally edited and everything, it could be full of typos or whatever.
Exactly.
But also, if it's not a good book, it's out there, and then future publishers would look at it and be like, well, we don't want this person because they write garbage. And
exactly. Or maybe they said, okay, you already written that, you don't have the potential to read another book. So it's very a risky move, you know.
Yeah. And the fact that, and it also could have been, had you not done that, if you just kept pursuing publishers, you could have just gotten rejection letters. Who knows?
Exactly.
You never know. You never know. But they saw the sales, and you did not. So you didn't look for. I don't know how it works in Spain, but is it common to try to get an agent before you?
No, I actually am still without an agent. So it's like usually most of the writers have one, but they didn't need one for my first big, big contract. And then it was like very easy, just the process of dealing with the publisher. And then I have what I have is an agent just for international rights, because that's like a very tough process with many different people. But for example, for my main country, this Spain and Latin America, it's just a direct conversation, because just after being already signed, just putting a person in the middle, I felt like it wasn't like honest. You know, I felt like it was somehow like disturbing a little bit the easy communication and the easy things. I value a lot the confidence, the trust, the good relation more than money or bigger royalties or whatever.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so then you just quit your job, which is amazing. But now that you're a full-time writer, do you feel, how has that changed how you feel about how you approach writing? Is there more responsibility? Like, I should keep doing the same thing because that's what works? Or do you feel like, I want to try something different? I want to write something slightly different than what I've been writing?
Well, actually, what I try to do is trying to push myself in every book, just to try a different, not a different genre in a broad way, just trying to touch many parts of the mystery or suspense, because the mystery and thrillers are very rich in subcategories, you know. So you can try a domestic thriller, a domestic noir, you can try a novel, a fast-paced thriller, you can touch a dramatic suspense, you can try a romantic suspense. There are many subparts you can try, and I'm always trying to like finding new ways to approach the ideas that I care about. But I enjoy writing many different things. So I do them just as I did, no, short stories as a hobby. When I want to try a dystopian thing, maybe I just write a short story about it. And if I feel it has potential, maybe I try to place that idea inside the things that I know I can do well. You know, the suspense, the twist, the trying to game the reader how in the way I write. You know.
So, and now, like when you write a novel, are you still looking towards your family and friends to give you feedback, and how much of that feedback do you implement?
Yeah, actually it happens in a different way. That at the beginning it was like this game of, I give my wife like 3 chapters and then I give them 2 more, and it was that game. And now I just wait to the end of the process and I give them the entire novel, because I've learned after the second book, I learned that she was like asking too much all the time, and I was I was the pressure. Like having someone waiting at your home, at your own house, for you to write is very tough. So,
And reading just a couple of chapters at a time, you ask a lot more questions than if you had a whole book, because then you're more patient with it.
yeah, and you get them solved along you.
Right.
You're right. When you're ready,
Just wait, that'll come away in a few more pages.
Exactly.
Wow. But is it ever the case where, because when you give somebody, because I'm the same way, I don't really show almost anything until my story is done, because the story might change as I'm writing it, and I go back and change a lot of different things. But do you ever have feedback early on after you finish the whole novel that says, "Oh,
yeah, maybe, yeah, but for example, my wife is like very, she's very tough when with connecting with the main character of or secondary characters, and she likes, she doesn't know why she doesn't like a character,
right,
but she tells me, I don't like this character that much, and so those comments are really good, because as I know my wife very well, I try to get her tell me why in a way that I can translate that to the book. So it's usually very it's very helpful to have her, actually, because she's kind of my main. She's inside my main group of readers, that age, profile, and so it's very easy and helpful.
But maybe you don't want all your characters to be liked,
Exactly. Some of them have a reason just to be unlikable.
They should be interesting.
Exactly, but no, yeah, exactly. And the thing is that, for example, the Snow Girl, the main character, is Maya. It's a girl that has been abused, and she is somehow like very close, and with she doesn't want to connect with anyone, or at least she can't connect with anyone. So it's pretty. Although she speaks in first person in the novel, she's very, when she's with someone, she's very short in sentences. She's very hard. And at the beginning, when my wife was reading the character, she felt, okay, this character is very rude. But then when she kept reading, she understood why she was like that. That way, she loved it, because it was very interesting. She didn't know how she was going to react to different things. So it was like very interesting to see her behave in different situations.
And that's the power of writing from the first person, right? Is because how they behave with other people can be just very short and not a lot of meaning to it. But then you have their internal monologue.
When you have the mind,
yeah.
When you have the mind and her thoughts, and not even her thoughts, she can be very intriguing, just trying to recall something that happened to her, and suddenly you relate with what has happened to her. So it's very a moment to connect with her, with the character. If you have the first person, you can do almost anything with the character, almost anything, in a way that you can create a first person serial killer, and it could be even likable,
right? Yeah. First person present tense to me is the most interesting way to write, because it's immediate, and it's you're just that person. And you obviously write, pretty dark stuff, as I do as well.
Thank you.
I'm sure you get the questions, what happened to you as a child, but do you enjoy? It's like, for me, it's not like I enjoy necessarily writing dark things. I like seeing how people rise up to challenges. And those challenges might be life-threatening, because it's almost cathartic, because it's like, what would I do in this situation? Is that how you feel, or how do you approach writing some of the real gritty things that you write?
Yeah, actually, I haven't thought about that much. I just try to create like a very interesting story with themes that are not only challenging, but also hard to swallow, in a way that you need to try to put you in the feet of the characters, in situations that you would never be. it's a way of, for me, reading has always been a way of traveling to other places and being in the point of view of person that I am not. So it's a very like cathartic moment when you connect with a character, and even if the character has suffered something difficult, or she, for example, in the case of Mira, it's the one I can think a lot because it's the character right now, it's in my mind all the time. It's a process of trying to get her move on of what has happened to her because she got abused, and trying to get her know all the dark emotions that she has inside. So in a way, you have to get to know the emotions and get to empathize with her.
Yeah.
And it's very I enjoy that process of getting to know a character and putting them in a place where I know I will not be, or maybe I hope I will never be. So it's the idea.
It allows you to, I think, explore fear from a safe place. But it's a very intimate exploration, right? Because you're sitting there alone at night writing about something terrible, and your imagination just goes and like, this is why I wonder if this is what it was like. And it's difficult, but it's also, like you said, when you're done, it's cathartic. You're like, wow, that I went through something without going through something.
Exactly. I remember a moment when I finished writing the Snow Girl. The Snow Girl, the beginning of the book is a 3-year-old girl goes missing in the New York Thanksgiving parade.
Right.
And I remember writing the first chapter just to create the perfect image of that desperation and despair and everything. This nightmare that could be for a family. And I had a daughter in that moment when I still have a daughter, but she's older now. But she was 3 years old at the time.
Oh,
and I remember going. Yeah, I remember going to a parade like 1 week after I finished the novel, and I remember like being in the middle of the crowd with the girl, with my daughter. I said, "Okay, this is not good. I've already been here. Something horrible is going to happen because I already know all these feelings." And I was like, with all the looking everywhere, just trying to find suspects everywhere. So it was like very. It's very hard when you put yourself your biggest nightmare, because it hurts you a lot.
Yeah, you didn't leave the parade though.
I left for 5 minutes. I
okay.
a moment and I said, okay, I'm leaving because I needed to breathe, and then I came back.
Wow.
But then needed to breathe because I was in those days just after when you finish the novel and you needed to rest a little bit. Just
you're very raw.
Correction and editing, and you are very open to everything. So
wow,
it was very hard.
Well, listen, Javier, we're going to wrap up, but before we do, we're going to do a quick storytelling. If you're up for it. This is the fun part of the show. I've actually just chosen one book randomly off my bookshelves, and you're going to give me a page number, and I'm going to read a sentence from that page, and that's the first sentence of maybe a 2-minute long short story. So I'll read the sentence. You give me the next 1 or 2 sentences, then I'll do a couple, and then I'll call it done.
Okay, great.
So this is my friend Wendy Walker. Her book just came out 2 weeks ago, I think. What Remains, and it's an excellent book. So everyone out there, go buy it. Give me a
page number. Okay.
Yeah, give me a page number between 1 and 250.
57.
Okay. And I'm just going to quickly scan the page for a sentence. Okay. So I'm just going to read this and then go for it. Within 2 days of the girlfriend's disappearance, he became the prime suspect.
Okay, that's great, actually. That's a very good beginning of a book. Huh? I could have skipped the first 57 pages, and if it began with that, I love the book. Huh?
Exactly.
I would say it was 2 days or 2 weeks, or just
2 days.
2 days after he became the main suspect.
Mm-hmm.
He was alone with her in the middle of the night in a cabin in the woods, and they met there because it was their anniversary.
He didn't know exactly how he was going to celebrate the anniversary, but he knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant one. They had been together for 5 years, and to him, that was 4 years too long. He made sure, in addition to the wine that he brought to the cabin, he brought a little white powder that she knew nothing about.
But the moment he put his feet inside the cabin, she felt that something wasn't right. She saw the bottle of wine open, and she saw blood on the floor. Somehow he knew that the night was going to be long.
He walked up to her and kissed her immediately, something he didn't do very often, but thought it would be a good distraction. "I love you," he said. "I want this night to last forever."
But she whispered something he couldn't hear, and suddenly he heard the footsteps of someone behind him, and that was the last thing he saw before falling. I don't know how to say that, blackout or something like that.
Mm-hmm. When he woke, he was no longer in the cabin in the woods. He didn't know exactly where he was. All he knew, it was dark and cold, and the concrete beneath him was damp. He tried to move his right hand, but found it chained to something on a wall.
What did he find? Whoa.
We can call it there.
So I think it's there. It's actually pretty good for a beginning, huh?
So that's the beginning of a story that we'll write together, and then I'll get to be
million of copies.
So many copies. Exactly. Well, it's so exciting to hear your story and to hear. I mean, I think the listeners will really appreciate it because it's a different story, right? It's it's somebody who just is immediately successful with writing, but the reality of it is you've been writing your whole life, so it wasn't like you had never done it before. You had been practicing all along, and so your success is well earned. And I'm looking forward to the English editions that are just coming out of your books. And yeah, man, I just wish you continued success. It was so great to talk to you.
Wow, thank you. The same. I hope to meet you soon in person. Actually.
Thanks, Javier. We'll talk soon.
Visit you in Colorado.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
That's it. That is my conversation with Javier Castillo. Guy's great. The guy, I really enjoy talking to him. A little bit jealous about his success, but that's what happens with writers is like that person sold a lot of books. That's pretty amazing. But you can't get too wrapped up into that. It's just tremendous. He's had tremendous success, and I mean, it looks like it's not stopping anytime soon. So excellent for him. And if you want to find out about his books, I mean, a lot of them are in Spanish, but now they're being translated. I think he's said something like 20 different languages now. But you can read all about his works at his website, which is just javiercastillobooks.com. And if you want to meander over to my website, carterwilson.com, you can sign up for my newsletter. You can check out my books. You can check out my appearances, or you can check out my writing retreats that I am teaching. So all that stuff that you can do. You can also look at other episodes of this show. And speaking of this show, that is it for this one. There are more episodes coming out soon. But in the meantime, I appreciate you, as always, watching and or listening to Making It Up. Take care. Bye.